So, hi there. Welcome back to Omakase, my writing advice and inspiration podcast. My name is Max, also known as M. Karen. If this is our first time meeting each other, let me give you a brief introduction. That over there in the background, spinning or running on her wheel because she's crazy. It's 10 in the morning. You're supposed to be a nocturnal creature. God, is she cute. God, is she cute. That is one of our chinchillas. That is Popola. And man, she loves that wheel. And she's so cute. And she keeps it going for like 30 seconds. Devil on the other side is more of the chill type. She's just kind of napping at this moment. You know, really serving the archetype of what it is to be a chinchilla. It's 10 in the morning! Popola, go to sleep! Hi there, guys. Today, we're gonna have, so far, it's a bizarre episode of the podcast already. But if you missed it last week, my lovely spouse and I decided to adopt two chinchillas. Popola and Devila. And, in case you didn't know me, my name is Max. I write books for a living. I have 3 children, 2 chinchillas, and 1 gray cat. His name is Yanto. My pronouns are they, them, and I know what you're thinking, Max, can't you record somewhere else? Well, the answer is yes, I could, but I would have to move my entire setup, and I think you guys, y'all love it when Yanto comes in and it's like, hey guys, I'm a cat, I'm gonna meow. I assume we will all learn to love the chinchillas, until I fix my regular setup. Anyhow, welcome to my writing advice and inspiration podcast, episode 22. The format for the show is relatively simple if you're new to this show. The first third is all about my week, what I've been doing, what I've been writing, what I've been up to, my creative writing process. The second segment is viewer questions. Today we'll be talking about starting a new story after dozens upon dozens of chapter 1s. And what to do when you want to mutate 100 blood bunnies into one idea. We'll be talking about the concept of science fantasy later in this episode. And the final segment, of course, is the prompt. Today we'll be talking about another world, another you. Before we get started with today's shenanigans, I want to let you know, as always, that the song you hear at the beginning and at the end of the show is Dream of Green by the OZ Jazz Collective. Link in the description down below, as well as a couple of other pretty handy links. If you're listening on iTunes or your preferred podcast app of choice, there is a link to the YouTube playlist if you are ever, at your desk and you want to have me on a different tab or while you're working on stuff. That right there is there for you. Also, did you know the show's on Spotify? Yeah, that's weird. We may not be on Spotify but for much longer. But anyhow, let's dive right into my week. How has my week been? Well, we have had these babies, the chinchillas, for a little bit. They are lovely and adorable. She has never played with her wheel this much at this time of day. Like I know I'm doing that trope of like this never happened before, but it actually has never happened before. Earlier this morning, my spouse and I woke up and found that the chinchillas had somehow disassembled the spinning wheel. Now, the way that the wheel is set up is that the internal part, the actual part that spins when they're walking on it, is attached to the wall of the cage by a very simple, screw. It's covered in plastic. It's very simple stuff, like a screw and a nut. And we woke up to find the spinning wheel on the floor of the cage, and we didn't hear this at night. Ironically, the chinchillas are supposed to be active at night, but they barely make any noise. Kitty and I are very heavy sleepers. Take one or the other. Jesus Christ, girls! Popola! Is it leg day today? I mean, you should never skip on leg day, but as I was saying, somehow one of these two, or the two of them combined, because they do love to play together, disassembled the innermost part that held the screw on the interior part of the cage. And when I woke up and I was, checking on them, one of them, I think it was Devola, was holding it in her hands. And as soon as I asked her about it, she just dropped it and walked away. And I'm like, what, you think I didn't notice what you two were up to? There will be talk about creative stuff, but I just want to talk about the chinchillas because they're like the most fun part of my life right now. We recently cleaned their cage for the first time. You're supposed to do it once a week. I'm recording this episode really close to the previous episode, so don't think that it's been 2 weeks since we got them. And we cleaned the cage, and we actually, we had them in the room. We created a nice little playpen for them, and it was really cute seeing them slowly adapt to the environment, At first, when they got down from the cage into the actual, floor of the bedroom, they were doing little hops. And then by the end, they were just running up and down everywhere. Chinchillas apparently can jump up to 6 feet. But don't tell them, though. I would rather they don't know they can jump up to 6 feet. Because if they can do that, nothing is safe. Nothing is safe. Kitty's bookshelf, full of anime figures, will be endangered. And we can't have that. Those figures are expensive. But anyhow, what about my life? Well, I've been dedicating this last week to preparing Patreon stuffs. It's not the most, it actually is the exciting stuff because I actually really love sitting down to talk about the podcast. Also, I am really sorry about the wheel in the background. She's looking at me. She knows she's doing something bad. Oh, she has her ears on. I think she's actually gonna pass out in the wheel. Well, nope. It's really cute. I wish you guys could see it. Like, she starts really fast and then she's doing like this hop just to keep the wheel going. It's kind of adorable. And there she goes again, yeah. I have never seen her use the wheel so much. I guess today actually is leg day. So, what do I love the most about creating the Patreon content? Because I love doing this podcast. I mentioned this last week, but this podcast is kind of the amalgamation of all the things that I love to do on YouTube. Vlogs about myself and my own personal life, showing you who I really am. Because I feel like that's also important. This is the sort of stuff that I really love in writing advice. It's the stuff that I love the most in Stephen King's On Writing, and I just forgot her name. Oh my god. The lady who wrote Bird by Bird. I am so sorry. I completely just forgot your name. I really loved her book. Bird by Bird is top three best writing advice books, and don't mind me totally Googling it on the side. Bird by Bird was written by Anne Lamott! Oh my god. Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. I really like that writing advice book. Almost because I listened to the audiobook. I got it a while back and I was listening to it, and the performance was very good, but the writing was also so incredibly solid that at times it almost felt like it was a stand-up routine. There were jokes in there, and very clever pacing of the jokes, things that you established early would come back. It's something that also appears a lot in Stephen King's On Writing, but what I really love the most about those books is the humanity side. My number 2 favorite writing book of all time, or writing advice book, is The Elements of Style by E.B. White and the other guy. Forget the other guy. I really see that book is nice. That book is a very nice guideline. It's a very nice colorless guideline of, like omit needless words, stay away from negative statements, beware adverbs, and so on and so forth. You can actually look at that list of tips and not take all of them whole cloth because, like some of them you may disagree with, but actually look at, what someone else did and apply it to your own writing. The basics of, how writing advice is supposed to work. But The Elements of Style is kind of, as I mentioned, colorless. There isn't a lot of character and explanation to the tips, as opposed to Stephen King's On Writing and Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird, where, and especially with Stephen King, where half of the novel is a memoir, And Stephen King very cleverly lays down the foundations for what he will mention later as the explanations as to how he arrived at his own style of writing. And I love that. That was actually incredibly clever. It's that sort of thing where you spend half of the novel just learning about him, and then when he talks about writing advice, he goes, yeah, I remembered this one character that I mentioned, like 100 pages ago, and I remembered what they told me, and he applied, that particular lesson this way and that way. So I always strive to give you my point of view, my, where I come from, and to always kind of ground my feedback in my own personal experience, because that's where it came from. I wasn't born with these ideas. I found them somewhere, or I picked them up from other people, or I learned from other people's mistakes. That is honestly one of the biggest perks of taking a creative writing course or being part of a writing group. Especially one of my writerly friends is going to college and has suffered through what may be the worst creative writing class that I've ever seen. But at least, even if the teacher's being really, really ineffective, and even if the lessons are kind of boring, at least my friend has had the chance to see what other people do and get to see their mistakes from another point of view and realize, yeah, I don't want to do that. I'm like, man, that person's writing was so ineffective. So yeah, I love showing you my point of view. That's why I love doing these podcasts. I love doing writing advice. I love showing you, how I would tackle a particular problem or how I have tackled it in the past. And of course, giving you some inspiration in the form of prompts. That I've been doing forever. Y'all who remember the Tumblr days would know that I was doing, daily writing prompts. Daily story seeds, daily inspiration, and daily character questions. And I may one day just grab all of those and just compile them into a book, because I put so much work into those. I would spend entire days just writing them out and making the slides. But aside from, just working on the podcast, what else have I been doing? I do a monthly writing zine, a little writing advice, little zine for my patrons who are pledging $10 and up. I actually print it physically and I mail it to them, whatever they are in the world. Actually about a third of them are actually overseas. And thankfully, postage for a little writing scene is not that bad. So I always just, it's actually really cool to know that someone out there, all the way in Denmark, or all the way, in England, or all the way in Canada, people are getting the zine, and that's actually super awesome. So every month I kind of sit down and I dig around for a theme. I've mentioned this on Twitter before, but in my writing scene, I basically just fill it with character ideas or prompt ideas. I've been doing characters for the last couple of months, mostly because it's very fun. I love to come in with a concept for a character and then a twist. It's kind of like my trademark way of tackling prompts. Establishing something and then immediately kind of getting you with the hook or twisting the very concept of the character. Last month's theme was about superheroes, or people with superpowers. And one of the character concepts that I really liked, because basically the whole scene was files of basically part-time superheroes who were getting hired for this agency. And they are all misfits, basically. And one of them that I really liked, a concept that I came up with on the fly, and I felt really good about it because it's just such a weird concept. The idea of a character who could turn themselves invisible, but the act of doing so would constrict their lungs, so as long as they were invisible, they could not breathe. And their hero name was Asphyxia. And I really like that. I really like the whole twist of you have this amazing, powerful ability, but it comes with this immediate drawback. And there was something about when I came up with that prompt, because I do this sometimes. I don't know if you do this. If you're watching a show and someone's underwater, or you're watching a movie, do you sometimes find yourself holding your breath to see if you could actually make it through that? If you're watching a show and it's one of those Mythbusters are testing how long it takes or how hard it can be to break out of a car that's gone underwater, and you're holding your breath, right? And you're like, oh yeah, let's do this. But then of course you realize you can't do it. It's fun like that. And I mentioned on Twitter that every month when I prepare the scene, I look for a theme. And once I get that, once I have the aesthetic for it, everything else just falls into place. So I did a lot of soul searching for this particular scene, and much like when I brainstorm novels, when I brainstorm the main theme of a scene, I look at images, I go through concepts, and of course I ask myself, what is exciting? What is fun? And I am feeling like something weird this month. I am feeling like something strange. But yeah, that's pretty much what my week's been. Working on the zine, getting all of these podcasts out of the way, so that I can spend pretty much the rest of the month. By the time you listen to this, I'm already working full time. And I also, because I wanted a break, wanted a small little break from writing and doing actively editing, because I've spent like the last 2 months editing, and I don't think I'm burning out, mostly because I'm really good at taking breaks. But I just wanted a change of scenery, so I've been focusing on these podcasts and the zine, and it's good. And once they're done, I can fully dedicate myself to the writing once again. It's good to take breaks. Nobody ever says this, but it's good to take breaks. It's good to step away from the writing, especially if you've been doing it for a very long time. Now, thank you for listening to my update. I know it's not the most interesting one, but I hope that if anything, you found out my top 3 favorite books. If you're listening on YouTube, there's actually a link to them in the description below. In case you missed them, they are Stephen King's On Writing, E.B. White's The Elements of Style, and Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird. I love those 3 books. Let's take a second to talk about the people who make this show possible. Starting with a very special shout out. I completely forgot to do this last week. I am very sorry to the following 3 people. Last week, before I recorded the podcast, we were talking a lot about the elections, the midterms for the US, and I actually posted a little call to action on Twitter. I asked people that if you voted and if you got yourself your I voted sticker, to add me with a picture of you, and that I would give you a shout out on the podcast. I forgot last week because I was so darn busy, but here we go. I want to give a big shout out to 3 lovely people who sent me their selfies. First and foremost, SGD Sing. I don't know how to pronounce your name. You're very lovely though. You're super sweet. You also left me a really sweet comment on one of my later tweets after that. SGD Sing. I didn't promise I wouldn't butcher your names, okay? Of course, William Holko, longtime viewer, longtime friend, and of course, Charlie Arlette, a very close friend of mine. Charles, you may hear me mention them every once in a while. Oh, hi there. This is Max from the future. I couldn't help but just actually look up how to pronounce SGD's name. So it is actually pronounced SGD Sing. It's one of those weird times when things actually are pronounced the way you read them. I actually kind of really appreciate that. Hey. Alright, and back to Max from the past. And now for the formal shoutouts. This show is brought to you thanks to all of the people supporting me through Patreon. Patreon.com/mkaren is the #1 place to support me and what I do. By pledging just $1 a month, you get yourself these podcasts up to a week before they go live on YouTube, as well as a bunch of other cool perks. As well, of course, as shoutouts at the end of the show. I'm gonna now, in the middle of the show, give a special shoutout to some of my most generous patrons. Starting with Attilek. Attilek has a DeviantArt page. You can find out more about their writing and their art over at deviantart.com/AHTILAK. And Hero Song. Hero Song is writing LGBT plus positive novels. You can find them over at smashwords.com. Just do a search for Hero Song. And of course, a shout out to the rest of some of my most generous patrons. Starting with A. Howard, Elisa Dudley, Amelia, Angela, Brenda, Lishadra, Gilbert Gaudreau, Irina Phoenix, Lacey, Mark Mariska, Nicola, Pat Eichson, Polly Craftool, Silmuse, and Synexia. Writing advice. Let's dive right in. I recently made a post on YouTube asking for questions. So remember that I might actually do a couple videos of just questions, or excuse me, a couple podcasts, just worth of questions, because the holidays are coming up and I am definitely not going to be around for the very last week of 2018 and the first week of 2019. So that backlog has got to be made somehow. So if you have writing advice questions, you should most definitely send them my way. And if you don't have writing advice questions, any questions, I might do an AMA at the end of the year. I haven't thought about that so far. So if you are interested in just sending me whatever questions you want, feel free to just start dropping them in the comments. I always make a point to answer them in the order I get them, so guess what? First come, first served. That's that. As for today's questions, we've got 2 of them. Let us begin with the first one. One of the easiest things to do when you're starting out, and when you're finding your own flow in writing, is to seek to find and to write perfection. And this can often lead to countless upon countless first chapters. And I think that it is in part because of the weight that we put on first chapters. And one of those other pitfalls is, again, the idea that the first chapter has to be very good, especially in the first draft, which is, of course, silly. Anyone who's gone through the whole process can tell you, and I can tell you, that the first chapter may be the number one thing that gets changed during the revision draft. It's the first third of the story, when you're finding your footing, when you're learning who the characters are and how they behave. You think you know them, but once you write them, once you're actually in the process, you realize that they are more. They're always more than what you expected them to be. So a dear writerly friend asks, how do you actually get started with writing a story after you have done dozens upon dozens of first chapters? You've been there so many times. You have done that walk. You have danced that dance so many times. How do you start writing that story now? Now, the answer for that is actually super simple, and it is something that I don't only recommend for when you're stuck, or for when you have been writing the same opening chapter for so many times that you're just exhausted with it. This is just something I just recommend in general. I want you to mentally picture a line, okay? And in this line, we're going to mark 3 points, okay? At the leftmost side of the line, draw a little triangle, a little indicator, marking that as the beginning of the story. In the middle, have another little triangle or line indicating the middle of the story, and at the far right, a little line representing the end of the story. This is, of course, the implied timeline of how a story goes. It's not about climax and rise and acts. It's just the beginning, the middle, and the end. Colorless. The answer to this problem, what do you do if you have been writing that opening chapter so many times that you're just tired of it and you don't know how to tackle it anymore? Here's what you do, okay? You graph the leftmost triangle / line indicating where the story begins, and you just squish it a little bit more to the right. Start closer to the middle. Just move that forward. Unless it is a story, a scene in the story that you really want to show, I would like to inspire you. Because when you have written something so many times that you're just exhausted with it, I can assure you, don't write it again. Just write what the next scene would be. Or write what the next most interesting part of the story would be. And start there. You don't have to start at the beginning of time. You don't have to tell me the story of how your fantasy world came to be. There's actually something that is very close to my heart, because in the first draft of my novel, Raven's Gem, the first time I wrote it, the prologue really. The prologue was the origin of the world. And through revision and through feedback from my beta readers, I found that prologue was so dreadfully ineffective, I chopped it entirely out. It's gone. You never got to read that if you read that book. Instead, I rewrote the prologue, and I made it about what the story is ultimately about. The main character, Lucian. I showed you a glimpse in his past, so you got to know him way before the story begins. When you see him in the prologue, he is in his early teens, and when you finally are reunited with him, he's 18. Time has passed. Time has progressed forward. He may be 20. I forget. It's been a long time since I wrote Raven's Gem, okay? Cut me some slack. I haven't written that wiki page yet. And this is something that comes back to me. The novel that I wrote recently, I felt really strongly about the first chapter until the feedback that I received from several of my beta readers proved that I had been wrong in my assessment. And it's the sort of thing that you don't realize until someone else reads your story, and someone else in a completely different space reads your story, and someone who doesn't know everything reads the story and goes, what was the point of this? And from my point of view, I know, because I know everything. Because I've written the whole story out. But when I got feedback, a lot of it was, yeah, this first chapter is hard to get through, or it's slow. And it's just that sort of thing where, once you get perspective on it, you realize that's not effective. And another great example is Justine's Blood, where I just chopped half of the first chapter because I realized it was just so dreadfully slow that I'm like, if I just start on page 2, the book feels really good. that one I found. That one I caught before I sent it to beta readers. And everybody loved the first chapter. Because I removed that one page of just very, very slow setup. You never know. People stress out so much over the first draft. They stress so much over the first chapter, when little do they know they're going to have to revise so much of it. And that's not to make you feel that what you're feeling right now and the struggle is futile, that you're just wasting your time. You're not. You have to actually write it. You have to write the bad part of your story so you can make it better later. You can't just write it good from the start because you don't have the perspective. You don't know what the story's about. And sometimes, even when you know what your story's about and you have the best of intentions and you mercilessly revise that first chapter, sometimes it ends up being a little slower than what you wanted it to. That's what happens sometimes. That's what writing is. But again, what are we here for? What are we doing here? We're here to tell good stories. So, you get those notes, you put them up on the board, and you get back into revision. Okay? Okay. To the dear writerly friend out there, worrying about having written dozens of versions of Chapter 1, I inspire you to, if you're actually legitimately just done and exhausted with that part of the story, shift the timeline forward. I don't think you should move it backwards, because you're going to end up having to rewrite that scene anyway. Just move it forwards. You never know. Trust me, you never know. You may think to yourselves, no, like you need to have this scene. But you probably don't. The only way to find out is to finish writing that novel first, and then to go into revision. Okay? Just move the timeline forward. Okay? That's what I think you should do. At least that's my advice, my opinion, and what has worked for me. Alright. Question number 2. A dear writerly friend has submitted a question that is very closely to something I talked about recently. I don't think they're referencing it, because I talked about it in the end of the video club, which is, at the end of the podcast, where everybody's tuned off, and only, like, a handful of you very curious people tag along and listen to me sing verses from a Harry Potter musical and other really silly things that I do at the end of the show. Their question was about mutating, combining, bringing together several plot bunnies, story ideas, story seeds into one. They talked about the idea of, I don't just want to write science fiction. I don't just want to write fantasy. I want to write science fantasy. I want to write something crazy. I want to combine all these story ideas and make them work. I want magic and aliens and space travel and magical creatures and all that stuff. And that's fair. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. This is the sort of thing where a different person would tell you, whoa, tone it down a little bit. And I'm so bad. That's the following is a facetious statement. That's a sign of weakness. If you have a crazy idea, you pursue it. You capture it entirely. The one thing I want to keep in mind, though, is that you can write this crazy story with fantasy elements and magic and science fiction and space travel and aliens and all these things. You can. The crux, the main problem, is going to be how you make all these elements work together. And I feel like we're going to have to talk about two completely different conversations, and I don't know which one to start with, so I'm going to grab the one from the end of the video club a couple weeks back. If you're going to be doing something so radical, if you're going to be doing this crazy setting, I want to first and foremost, I want to start with the big ugly question, okay? Or the big ugly statement. Don't fall into tropes. This is what I was talking about at the end screen the other day. I was talking about fantasy stories where fantasy elements appear not because they belong in that world, but because it's fantasy and fantasy has to have dragons in there. I don't hate dragons, but I'm tired of these fantasy elements that show up with no explanation and with no desire to have them be anything else but from what we know. This is mildly related because it's a creative activity. There is a pen and paper role-playing game that I really enjoy. It's titled Dungeon World, and it's a fantasy role-playing game. It's a classic fantasy role-playing game with classes and adventuring. But what I really love about that pen and paper role-playing game is that one of the rules, or one of the recommendations really, during the character creation process and the world creation process, is that it's all created as a community. It's not just the game master / dungeon master making everything hours before the first session. The players are all encouraged to play different races and different classes and to give their own spin to what these classes mean. When I was running Dungeon World, I had tons of fun with characters who were like, I want to be an elf, and then I would ask them, well, what does it mean to be an elf in your world? What do elves look like? Are they even called elves? And just by asking questions like that, the world becomes automatically way more interesting. And then you immediately are stepping away from the familiar tropes that are kind of tired at this point. Like, how do I explain this? I mentioned this in that end of the video club, but like, you can have dragons in your story. I just want you to have a reason for them to be there, to explain why they are there. Not just say, well, it's a fantasy setting, and fantasy settings have dragons, so there's a dragon right there. That's, to me, is not exciting. That, to me, feels phoned in. No matter what you're writing, no matter what genre it is, when you're introducing these fantastical elements, there has to be justification for them. And I know someone out there's like, that's too much work, Max. And I'm like, well, yeah, you're writing a book here. You're creating an expression of your creativity. You're making something new that hasn't existed before. Why would you settle for anything less than fantastic, than amazing, than mind-blowing? Now, there's a very easy solution to this. Well, I was going to do a whole workshop on this, but the patrons did not vote for that option. As a matter of fact, it was a 2-vote difference that decided that theme was not going to get picked. Every month I do a workshop video, and the patrons get to vote on it and see it a month early. But one of the options that I had for this month / the previous month was don't call them vampires. And this is, unfortunately, you don't get the full presentation because the patrons didn't pick it. I may bring it back another day, but what I mean by that, and this connects directly to what I was talking about earlier. If you want to have dragons in your setting, I would like to first ask you to explain why they're there, and make them exciting. Make them something new. And what I recommend, and this is something that I gave advice to someone a long time ago. Someone wanted to write vampires because they loved the idea of vampires. But they didn't want to write vampires because vampires have all this baggage. And no matter what you do, if you're writing a vampire story, you have to address all of the tropes. You have to address garlic, you have to address sunlight, you have to address feeding, you have to address ghouls? What are they called? The little like the half vampires, like the bloodlines. You have to address whether they have to ask before being led into a house. There's all of this baggage, and that to me is the most unfun thing to write about. And the advice that I gave them back then, and the advice that I give myself when dealing with this, is if you want to write vampires, ask yourself what is it you actually love about vampires. And I'm not saying this in a derogatory way. I'm not saying this to make fun of you, because I relate to this. One of the coolest things about vampires is that they are eternally youthful, sexy people. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. If you want to write about eternally youthful, sexy people, then write about that. Don't call them vampires. Make them something new. Make them something else. Because when you take what you really like about something, If what you really like about dragons is that there's this ancient creature that has existed since the beginning of time, they don't have to look like big lizards. They don't have to breathe fire. They don't have to hoard gold. They can do anything and be anything more exciting and blow people's minds. That right there is the trick. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And when you have a crazy idea like this, with all these, different elements and stuffs, it is going to be a little overwhelming. And I get that. The first thing that I would say is that I would inspire you to not call the magical powers magic, mostly because magic carries baggage. But that's, stuff that you're going to have to figure out for yourself. My recommendation, again, is to not fall in for tropes. And to question what are the elements in the fiction that you love the most. If you really love aliens, and you want to have aliens in your story, and you want to have magic in your story, and you want to have magical creatures in your story, ask yourself what it is you love the most about each one. Make them yours, make them special, and I would like to inspire you to have them intertwined in some way, so that they don't feel as though isolated elements, towers of stone in the ocean, but rather the pillars of your story, upon which the foundation of the story takes place. Make them your own, okay? Man, I love that piece of writing advice. I know that, it sounds weird for me to say it, but I really love giving that piece of advice. Is that you want to write about vampires. Do you like them drinking blood? And then you're like, not really. Do you like them being weak to sunlight? Not really. Do you love that they're sexily, eternally youthful people? And then you're like, yeah. And I'm like, then write about eternally youthful, sexy people. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Make them your own. Give them completely new, interesting abilities. Make them way more interesting than vampires. I'm not saying vampires are lame. I'm just saying vampires have so much baggage. It's kind of exhausting. As your editor, I would have to point out all of those questions. I would have to bring up, hey, you haven't talked about sunlight and what it does to vampires. And then if your answer is, don't worry about it, that's bad writing. That's just bad writing. And don't have bad writing, okay? This is a matter of, world building, and some of you may argue that, Max, you barely do world building. And I do as much as I need to write that story, and I build on it during revision. That's how my process goes, because I don't know the story until I start writing it. And I don't think it's the best course of action for everyone. This is the dumbest comparison, but just follow along, okay? I just like the wordplay here. Because sometimes you're getting a massage, and this is a dumb metaphor, and the person's undressed to your comfort levels. I want you to world build to your comfort levels, okay? That was a dumb metaphor there, Max. See, just like undressing, world building works just like that. World build as much as you need for your story. Alright, enough jokes out of the way. I hope this answer helped, and I hope that if anything I gave you another point of view. The update has been given. The questions have been answered. It is now time for the final segment of the show, the prompt. Every week, I give you a weird exercise, a weird story idea, something to get you thinking about writing and to critically analyze the stories around you. I want to inspire you today to do a writing exercise, or if anything, to just think about your writing. If you create something, let me know. I might give you an RT, I might give you a reblog. I want to inspire you to create today. To look at your characters, and to look into what I consider to be one of the most terrifying moments. One of the most terrifying ideas. A very subtle kind of horror. And the title of today's prompt is Another World, Another You. Again, take your time to slow down. If anything, just think about your story. Think about what you would do. How it would inspire you. How you would tackle the situation. I want you to take one of your characters. The protagonist, the antagonist, someone central to the story. Or someone whose mind you want to get inside of. Get to know them better. Get to understand them. Take this character and imagine them walking down a busy street. It can be the cobblestone streets of that fantasy world. It can be the deck of their spaceship. It can be Broadway. It can be the street they grew up on. In that small town in the middle of nowhere. Passing by the dilapidated house they once called home. I've always been keen on letting the weather seep into my stories. It's gotten very cold recently. Really cold. I want you to imagine your character walking down that street. As they breathe, as they exhale, they see their breath in front of them. It's cold, it's chilly. Are they wearing the right clothes? What are they wearing? What time of day is it? Is it nighttime? Are they coming home from work? Are they going to work? Are they going somewhere? Are they going to meet someone? Someone special or someone they despise? Or both? Imagine your character wrapping their arms around themselves to keep warmth. Around them, the streets are empty or filled with people. Around them, skyscrapers climb up into the ceiling of the world. Real-life giants of glass and steel. I am picturing a busy street. A busy street in the shopping district. My character, is walking on the sidewalk. The street is a blur of cars driving in both directions. Always going somewhere. Always too busy to stop and take in the sights. My character's too busy too. If you have lived in the city, you know. There's no time. There's never enough time. We're always fighting against the grains of sand fallen from the top to the bottom of the sand clock. Grain by grain. I imagine stores, neon signs, glass display cases, wide windows showing mannequins, showing items for sale, the names of stores, barred windows, boarded windows, abandoned shops, places that closed down forever ago. The sidewalk, much like the street, a blur of people. Always moving somewhere. Always too busy to take in the sights. But today, for your character, it's a little different. Wherever they are, wherever they're going, the blur of living, the sights around them, the walls of the spaceship, the brick and stone buildings of that old city, the emptiness of your small town. All of it comes to a stop as your character realizes that in front of you, in front of them, it's a stranger. A familiar stranger. Someone who reminds you of who you used to be. That person moves closer. As they move closer, you realized it's closer to what you thought. Not years before, not days before, hours before, your last glimpse in the mirror, that person looks just like you. Not a carbon copy. Not a mimic. It is you. They look like you. They dress like you. Even As you look at them, in their eyes, you catch that same sadness that is tearing you apart. The same expression. But they are not looking at you. They are walking. What do you feel as you look at that stranger who looks just like you and dresses like you, and in their eyes carries the same sadness as you? Does it terrify you? Does it fill you with dread? Or is it curiosity? What is it like to stumble on a stranger who looks just like you? Step into the mind of your character for just a second, because a second is all you get. Listen to their inner thoughts as they witness a stranger who is not so strange to them. A mirage, a hallucination, a flux in the fabric of reality. Another version of themselves, walking the opposite way, in a different world, in a different time. Two timelines diverging for 1 second. An eclipse. The sun and the moon aligning. The stars falling into place. What is it like to see someone just like you? Do you even recognize them? When was the last time you looked at yourself in the mirror? When was the last time you analyzed the features of your face? When was the last time you realized that you look so sad when you were walking alone? The stranger walks past you. What do you do? Do you turn around? Do you keep walking? For an instant, something bizarre happened. The layers of reality blended into one another. Or so one thinks. It could have been a dream. But what if it was not? What are the thoughts in your character's head? What is their instinct? Do they keep on walking? Do they turn around? Or do they find themselves stopping to think and wonder about that other self they stumble upon on that cold, cold night? And welcome to episode 22 of Omakase, my writing advice and inspiration podcast. I hope that was fun. One of the most terrifying things that I have ever witnessed was a dream in which I stumbled upon another version of myself. And I remember feeling this immediate dread. And I don't know if it's something that I captured in the prompt, or something that you might have captured yourself in your own version of the writing, or that you could encapsulate when you sit down to write. But it's this idea. I remember when I had that dream, my immediate reaction was dread, because, we acknowledge that we are who we are, and there's only one of us. And that I have to be the real Max, the only Max that exists. The only Max that looks like that. The only Max who lives here, the only Max who does this, and sounds like this, and looks like this. So when I stumbled on another version of myself who looked just like me, and acted just like me, and dressed just like me, I felt this sense of dread, this existential crisis in the midst of a dream where I wondered if I was the real Max, or just another one. And that's scary. Dreams are a powerful source of imagination. And I hope that if anything, I gave you something to think about. something else to be afraid of, to stumble upon in a nightmare. But anyhow, hi there. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I hope that if anything, I was good company to you during your commute, while waiting for the bus, or on the bus, and while playing with your cat, doing dishes, or preparing yourself for your daily writing session. Thank you for tagging along. Thank you for being here for me and for listening. It means the world to me. I talked about it on the podcast last week, but I really love doing this. And I am humbled that you choose to spend your time with me. Okay? Okay. You can go now. You don't have to tag along if you don't want to. I want to step into the end of the video club, where I give a shout out to every single one of my patrons pledging $1 and up. I always record this live. I don't record it once and then I just paste it over. That's not me. That ain't me. Anyhow, thank you for tagging along. Thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me. Max said, trying to buy time. And now, I'm going to read out my patrons in alphabetical order, as sorted by patron. Are the chinchillas making noise again? They are cuddling together. Oh no. They're so cute. I'm sorry. Shoutouts are over. I'm going to just... The worst part is that they're very aware, and if I move over to take a picture, they will jump out. They'll be like, nah, show's over, Max, get out of here. Anyhow. A. Howard, Atlac, Alistair Baywood, Elisa Dudley, Amanda Stevens, Amelia, Amy Palmer, Angela, and the other Angela, Aniexo Hoshi, Biting the Sun, Blarg, Brenda, C.E. Richards, Caitlin, and the other Caitlin, Kathy Lindsay, Lishadra, Christiane, Christine Dennis, Kristen Lofton, Clem Pastor, Dwayne Jackson, Eleanor, Erasos, Joffrey Raby. A few weeks back, I did the shoutouts as though my patrons were fighting game characters. And Smash Brothers Ultimate is coming out in less than a month. And I'm feeling the hype. I never get hyped, but it's the sort of thing where I'm like, I've really been looking forward to that game. And in my head, even though you're hearing Dream of Green, I am actually hearing a completely different remix of the Choose Your Character theme from Smash Brothers Melee? And I keep thinking to myself, I want to do the shoutouts as fighting game characters. I'll probably do it next week or the week after that. When the hype achieves maximum velocity, I'll probably do shoutouts like that again. The reason why I don't do them regularly is because it actually killed my voice. I do voice work. That's not true. I do Let's Plays of visual novels, and I do voices. That's what I do. Don't mind me taking a sip of tea. So, sometimes I record, my wife and I will record for, 10 hours at a time. So it goes to show how much it killed my voice to do those shoutouts if 10 hours of voice work is fine. But shouting, 60 patrons destroyed my voice. Anyhow, listen, I'll do it. I'm not admitting that I wouldn't do it. I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna do it the week before Smash comes out. That's a promise. There you go. I'll forget about it. I'll probably forget about it. Remind me, okay? It's up to you. It's up to you now. Only you can remind me to do things. Gilbert Gaudreau, Hero Song, Irina Phoenix, Janosch Hebutsky, J. Tonic Kirkwood, Jeffrey James Williams, Juan Nunes, K.M. Anderson, Kameshwar Rao Shaluri, Kaylee, Kiel, Kit Lee, Lacey, Lier Killo, M.T. Locatelli, Mark Maruska, Mary Foster Smith, Nicola, Nicole Grissom, Nicolay, Noam Sahar. Novels and Tomes, Pablo, Pat Eitson, Max Killing Time while the page loads, Polycraftwell, Raquel Fernandez, Rhiannon August, Roa, Shimmer Tales, Sky, D. White, Somuse, Sylvia Latilla, Synexia, and Wendy Christopher. Hey guys, welcome back to the end of the video club. The start of this podcast might just be the dumbest start to a podcast. It's not dumb, it's just bad. They're still cuddling. These two chinchillas are still cuddling. They're living the life. They live in a chinchilla mansion, and they have a huge wheel, like 2 houses in there. They have 2 places to nap together. And these chinchillas are just napping in a corner, but not a corner in the back, it's a corner in the front. So it's almost as though they are actively trying to prove to me, one of their owners / parent, that they don't care for those houses. Hey human, I know you got us a nice wooden castle for us to sleep in and cuddle in. But screw that! We're gonna sleep in the corner! Right where we can keep an eye on you. Man, I love those chinchillas, they're so cute. They're the cutest things in the world. We took them out. We took them out while I was cleaning, and they were so sweet. They were so sweet. They did a thing where they got immediately super comfortable, so getting them back into the cage was a problem. Because they were like, hey, get on my sleeve, and then they're like, yeah, I'll get on your sleeve, but I'm not going into the cage, screw that, I'm on your shoulders now, I'm on your head, and I'm like, this is not gonna work out. And meanwhile, Yanto is like, I want to play with the chinchillas too, but not in a bad way. Like Yanto, our cat, has been so sweet. He's just like, friends? It just goes to show, the one time there was a mouse in the room, Yanto tried to make friends with it. He did not try hunting that mouse at all. That day we felt a little disappointed in our cat. We're like, Yanto, you're a cat. The one thing cats are known for is catching mice. And Yanto's like, yo, but me and Mousy are friends. And I'm like, Yanto, you've known Mousy for 2 seconds. I could make a whole webcomic series about my cat and my 2 chinchillas. But I won't. Hey guys, how y'all doing? It's been crazy here over at MKRN Central, but I hope you two have been having a good time. NaNoWriMo is going. It's happening. To those of you caught in the struggle, fighting to continue to do the thing you love, keep going. Keep fighting. You got this. It feels hard? Yeah, because it's hard. This is the toughest it could ever be. A monthly challenge like this is rough. If you are feeling the burnout, stop and give yourself some time to rest. But if you think you can keep going, then keep going. When you think you are done, you're only 80% done. Isn't that a freaking military quote? I forget. Anyhow, you take care of you, okay? You should first and foremost take care of you. But anyhow, I'm out of things to talk about. I'm gonna turn around. Are the chinchillas still napping? They're still napping together. Man, that's the life. That's the life. I wish I could just nap all day. Nap all day and spin in a wheel. That's the life. Alright, I'm getting out of here. You guys take care. Stay strong. And see you in the next one. Keep on spinning. Keep on spinning, bro. Keep on spinning.